is shining, in the midst of the darkness shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us, set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on me, shine on me, shine, Jesus, shine, fill this land with the Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze, set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow, flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light.
Good morning, this is Brian Poe, and I am your host this morning on Let the Bible Speak. I'm the preacher of the Escanaba Church of Christ, and Alex and I, we are your host here. This morning, though, I am continuing our study in the life of Elijah, our series on faith and fire. Faith and fire. This lesson is lesson 4, and I call it Faith Contested. Faith contested. I want to ask the question that I have been asking every lesson so far as I begin and as I close, and that is, how does the life of Elijah inspire you? We are just about closing in and halfway done with this series, and I hope that there are some things that you have developed in the life of Elijah that you see, that inspires me. That impacts my life. I really hope that you found some things so far. So let's get into this lesson, Faith Contested. So jumping right in to the context that we just left in 1 Kings 17. Remember, 1 Kings 17, Elijah was in Zarephath with the woman, the widow. Her son dies, and God raises her son from the dead. And that is how 1 Kings 17 ends. Now, the drought is over. That's why Elijah was in Zarephath with that woman. The drought is over. It seems that Elijah has not seen Ahab for a few years. And Elijah summons Obadiah. We'll get to the text in just a few moments. Elijah summons Obadiah to set up a meeting between him and Ahab. And as we see in 1 Kings 18, Obadiah was rather fearful. Now the passage we're not going to read, 1 Kings chapter 18, the first 15 verses. Important verses, but we're going to skip over them. I encourage you to look at the first 15 verses of 1 Kings 18. It's a segue between Zarephath and Mount Carmel, okay? Because we leave 1 Kings 17 in Zarephath, and we get to 1 Kings 18, we need to get to Mount Carmel, and the first 15 verses is that segue. But I don't want to dismiss the first 15 verses because there are important things that you can learn from the life of Obadiah. Now, I want to note, though, that this is not Obadiah, the one you see as a prophet author in your Bible, the minor prophet Obadiah. The writer, the minor prophet Obadiah, would have lived roughly 600 BC, whereas the Obadiah during the life of Elijah was around 870, the time frame of Elijah. Okay, but what do we learn about this Obadiah? Obadiah was a man of faith. Okay, we've been talking about faith. We looked at the faith of Elijah. We looked at the faith of the woman in Zarephath. Well, Obadiah was a man of faith as well. When the persecution was high, we see in those verses, he hid 100 prophets. Now, that would have easily been a death sentence by an evil king like Jezebel. He was a man of faith. Yet his faith was also shaken when Elijah asked him to set up a meeting with Ahab. Remember, I mentioned this in the last lesson, that when a person's faith is shaken, they typically will run to two different questions, one of two questions or both. One, God, what are you doing? And then, what have I done? And in this case, Obadiah's first response is, what have I done? The same thing with the woman in Zarephath. What have I done? Have you come to remind me of my sin? Now, after being assured of his safety, Obadiah sets up a meeting between Ahab and Elijah. And we are about to see the context, the core of this lesson called the contest of faith. Let's look at 1 Kings chapter 18. We're going to now read the verses 16 through 19. 1 Kings 18. Again, I encourage you to read the first 15 verses on your own time. We're going to start at verse 16 when Ahab and Elijah first meet each other after these few years. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" "I have not made trouble for you, for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your families have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now, summon the people from all over Israel to meet me at Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." All right, so this lesson gets good. I love this lesson. It's exciting, and just hang with me. See, my boys like Pokemon cards. They're 8 and 10. They have some Pokemon cards, and please forgive me. I know everyone does not like Pokemon cards, but Pokemon cards, they have value, strength on it. Forgive me for my below layman terms. I'm not a Pokemon guy, okay? But I do know enough that these Pokemon cards, they have strengths and weaknesses and attack power, abilities, strengths. And so you put these cards on the table, and there's a winner and loser. There's a contest, okay? Now, since my oldest son, Caleb, he was the first to kind of be old enough to have Pokemon cards and understand what they do for the most part. So when him and my younger son, Ben, play, obviously Caleb wins. Now, needless to say, when they play against me, I don't even have Pokemon cards. I don't know what all that stuff is. I lose all the time because I'm at the mercy of these rules that are being made up, and I don't know. Anyways, the point though is that these cards have powers and abilities, and those powers and abilities are challenged. The strength level the strength levels play a great part. There are possible morphs that these things can morph into, other things and other variables. But all in all, the stronger and more capable character will stand in the end. Okay, that's really the end of it. You got these characters, powers and strengths and weaknesses, and you challenge, and the strongest, the more capable, will be standing in the end. We see the same contests, the same challenges throughout the Bible, okay? Such as the plagues in Egypt. You look at the plagues in Egypt, it's not that God just sent plagues. God was sending plagues, and the Egyptians were trying to match them. They whipped up their own snakes out of the staffs. They were able to turn somehow their own water into blood. There's this contest, okay, going on. David and Goliath. You have the Philistines. We have our biggest warrior. That was like one of those golden Pokemon cards, you know, the one that you know if your opponent has that card, I'm not going to win. And then here comes little short boy David. I mean, in the natural world, it's like, this is not a contest at all. This is suicide. But there's this contest. Israel versus the Philistines. Send out your best card. Send out your best man. And we also see the contest with Gideon and the 300 men. Okay? Gideon and 300 men. Now, Gideon had a lot of people. A lot of people responded, we'll fight. But God continually said, no, less. Gideon's like, I want that golden card. I want to win. But God says, no, you don't need that. Just 300 men. And they took the army. The army almost killed themselves. I'm sorry. Excuse me. We also have in the New Testament Jesus on the cross. Jesus on the cross. If you just imagine in the spiritual realm the contest, the battle, this challenge between Satan and the heavenly powers. And then finally we come to the context of 1 Kings 18, where Elijah is going to challenge these prophets. Now, in a more spiritual-minded world that they were in, okay, we are not in a very spiritually minded world anymore. But in a very spiritual-minded world that they were in, these were not contests between people. These were contests between the gods. And now, just work with me for a minute. I'm not trying to say there's many gods out there, but imagine the Philistines, imagine those enemies. They are challenging Israel's God against our God. This is a challenge between the gods. And that was the point that God used David against Goliath. It was the point to see that's impossible, because it was supposed to look impossible, because it wasn't about the mere human strength. There's the idea that, well, as David even said, the Lord will win this battle. That's what he told Saul, remember? That was the point of God telling Gideon, only use 300 men. The guys who lapped the water in their hands, Gideon counted, I had several thousand, but God, now I got 300. God says that's good enough, because that's all you're going to need. This isn't your battle. I am going to do something. That was the point of having victory over death by using a carpenter's son, born in a manger, raised in Nazareth. How many lows can you hit? This was not going to be victory, but he was victory. It was God's victory. And this was also the point in the story of Elijah. Elijah meets Ahab. And you see the rivalry immediately between Ahab and Elijah. Ahab quickly looks at Elijah. He says, "You troubler of Israel." And what is Elijah's response? We only have one response from each. "You troubler of Israel." And Elijah says, "You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed Baal's." They both are just, you're not the guy. I'm stronger than you. Well, they agreed to settle the matter. They realize that there's got to be a contest. Let's settle this out in the field. Our gods will fight. So they agreed to meet on Mount Carmel. Elijah proposes a contest to prove who is the real God. Let's read the next few verses. 1 Kings 18, verses 20 through 24. 1 Kings 18, 20 through 24. So Ahab sent word throughout all of Israel, and they assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bowls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bowl and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. But you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God." Then all the people said, "What you say is good." Oh, the contest is on. There's no turning back now. I want you to notice first the response of the people. When Elijah calls them out, it says that they said nothing in verse 21. They said nothing. It seems like they may be a little ashamed there. I don't know. I'm just reading in between the lines. Maybe a little shame. Maybe they know that they've been living in the wrong. But they say nothing. Notice their response when he proposes the altars. In the end, what you say is good. It is peculiar. I wonder what they were expecting. Did they trust in the prophets of Baal so much that they thought that he would win? Did they know that Elijah was right? I don't know what they were expecting. It's just some things to ponder and contemplate. What was going on here? What were they expecting? Very interesting. But there's game rules set. Elijah set these rules. The prophets of Baal built their altar. We read about it in 25 through 29. Let's look at that. Verses 25 through 29. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bowls and prepare it first. Since there are so many of you, call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bowl given them and prepared it. When they called on the name of Baal from the morning till noon, Baal, answer us, they shouted, but there's no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar that they made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he's in deep thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping or must be awakened. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears as was their custom until their blood flowed. Midday passed and they continued to their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. They were allowed to do anything they want besides light a match. They shouted, they sang, they slashed, they cut, but no response. And I look at this and there's some application here. A person can take this and turn it into a lesson maybe, but the delusion. Notice the delusion. These prophets, I know that you see some ideas of some people in some messed up theologies because they want some leadership or they want people to love them and they want people to follow them, But it seems that these prophets really believe that they can muster up this fire from their God. They actually think that fire is going to come down, and they're slashing themselves and cutting themselves till the blood flows. At the end of the day, all day long, nothing happens. Elijah makes very specific rules for his altar. Let's read verses 30 through 39. Verses 30 through 39. Then Elijah said to the people, come here to me. They came to him, and he prepared the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, Your name shall be Israel. With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bowl into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, fill 4 large jars of water, and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Do it again, he said, and they did it again. Do it a 3rd time, he ordered, and they did it a 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, the Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. Wow. What a contest. What a contest. First, I want you to notice that Elijah tore down, they didn't tear down, he used the material used from an old torn down altar. Now this is way up in northern Israel, where many of the altars of God were torn down, and he says, rebuild that one. That is an altar of God. Rebuild that one. Elijah wants the people to know that there's no fame. If you notice through the story, he wants people to know There is no feign. There is no trickery. This was no power that he possessed. In fact, this was going to go against nature itself. Elijah wants the people to know God. Furthermore, and most importantly, Elijah is confident in God, and he knows that God will win the contest. Both sides, if you want to bring back this idea of the cards with the powers and the morphs and the strengths, both sides lay down their cards, and the gods are compared. The god of Baal, well, he's proven to be nothing. He didn't respond. He left the prophets all cut and bleeding and hurt. But the God of Israel proved himself to go against nature. After the altar was filled with water, the meat full of water, the wood saturated, and everything. And then he brings fire and it consumes everything. Our God won the contest. Now, I do want to note, don't try that at home. Just to give you a little laugh. How can we use this today? What an amazing contest. We see this challenge. I mean, Elijah versus Ahab. But it wasn't Elijah versus Ahab. It was the God of Israel versus the gods of Baal. What can we take away from this? I think the main thing we can take away is that we can trust our God to win the fight. We can trust our God to win the fight. I come back again to my kids playing the Pokemon. See, we play, sometimes I think we as Christians, we play our God card. We play our faith card. We step out, but then we step back and we hope for the best. While thinking, I played my card, but I wonder if Satan has a bigger card. I wonder if my strength is high enough. And we doubt. We often have so much doubt. And I'm speaking for myself too. It's just so easy to doubt. We all understand the feeling of having people look at us and look at our conviction, look at our faith, our practice, and sometimes they mock us and laugh at us. And our quick response in those times is we shy up. Because just think of the comparison between Elijah standing before Ahab, but not just Ahab, but Ahab and all these hundreds of prophets. And even Elijah says, I'm the only guy on my side. And sometimes that's us, right? We seem alone at work or at school or out in the world, and we're the only ones on God's side. Sometimes, unlike Elijah, sometimes we shy back. Say, you know what, maybe I'll come back another day when I got some more people on my side. But what that looks like in reality, when we shy up from standing strong for our God, what that looks like in reality is people stop going to worship. People stop going to worship. Why go to worship if you don't have that high strength in God? Okay? If you don't just readily think that he's strong enough to fight your battle, then why worship him? Another reason, what this looks like in reality, is we stop telling people about God. If God does not wow us, then why would I tell other people? If he's not going to wow you, why would I tell people about God if he has not wowed me? What this looks like in reality, when we shy up, we conform to the world. Why make an effort to conform to a God that does not intrigue you? Why make an effort to conform to a God that is not strong? And finally, what this looks like, we compromise our ideologies. We first to go was creation. Because when you have a low-strength card God, it's easy to imagine other means of creation. The point is we need to stand. Why? Because our God, he can stand the contest. Just like he stood against all the prophets of Baal, the contest was a blowout. It's a shutout. our God can stand. The only two reasons I see why we would not stand by our God. Two reasons why we would not stand by our God. One is if he would truly, without a doubt, lose. And if that's the case, then I agree. Throw in the cards, quit. But that's not true. That's not true. The other reason why we would not stand by our God is if we think that he would lose. If we think he would not win the contest. And the only reason I think anyone would think that is because you do not know God the way you should. You need to write that down. Sink into that phrase. The only reason you might think that God would lose is because you don't know him the way you should. The root is knowing God. And Elijah, he told them to pour water on the altar. And they said, more water, more water. And Elijah's like, you can throw that altar in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. In a few minutes, it's going to be on fire. That's the kind of faith that Elijah had. It did not matter how much water. It did not matter how big the fight. My God, he's got it. That's incredible faith. Our God can stand the contest. We need to know our God like this. We need to know our God like this. And that's the lesson for this morning. Again, I want to close with a question. How does the life of Elijah inspire you? And I hope even from this lesson itself, you took something away saying, wow, my God can stand the contest. Yes, he can. You know, there are some materials that we have because we want your faith to grow. We want your faith to grow. We want your knowledge of God to grow. So some of the things we offer for free are these the 7 series study guide by the World Bible School. And these are just, they walk through the Bible. They teach you more about the Bible. If you want a study guide and looking through the Bible, ask us for these. We'll send them for free. There's also, of course, we offer a Bible. If you need a Bible, we will send it to you for free because we push studying the Bible, reading the Bible, memorizing, because knowing the Bible is knowing God, and knowing God is a strong faith, and that is what will help us to stand strong when the winds come and when the rains come. We will stand if we know God and know his word. The mailing address, the contact info for Marquette Church of Christ is P.O. Box 372, Marquette, Michigan 49855. That's Alex there. I'm actually from the Escanaba Church of Christ. My info is on the internet, of course. The website, www.letthebiblespeak.net. Reach out to us if you have anything. You know, if you have any questions, reach out to us. Questions about these lessons, questions about how to become a Christian, questions about life, God, the Bible, ask us. We'll love to help you on your journey. I hope that these lessons have inspired your faith. Let me just say a quick prayer for you. Lord, I ask that these lessons have impacted our hearts in a way that you would love, and I pray that you would just grow in our hearts and strengthen our faith. In your name we pray, amen. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much. I hope you have a blessed day. God bless you. This is Brian, and Let the Bible Speak.
The Father's glory blaze, Spirit blaze, set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow, flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send